Tashdile everyone, I'm Sakina Butt and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly feature in English that tells you about this week's news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines first. His Holiness the Dalai Lama chairs 33rd Mind and Life Dialogue in Dharamshala. 16th Tibetan Parliament in Exile begins its 5th session. Tibetans and Tibet supporters around the world commemorates the 59th Tibetan National Uprising Day. 20 parliamentarians from Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania issue statement of support for Tibet. CTA hold press service for deceased self-immolator Tseko. His Holiness the Dalai Lama chaired the 33rd Mind and Life Dialogue at Tsuklakhang in Dharamshala on Monday this week. Over 5 days, the intellectual group of scientists and Buddhist scholars, led by His Holiness, focused on His Holiness's long-standing priority and deep commitment to secular ethics education initiatives. The group explored education models to train younger generation to be compassionate, caring citizen and committed to the common good.
Our meeting, since our first meeting, two purposes. One, expand our knowledge, external things, internal things. Now, the second purpose, whether we may call century by century, further develop more civilization.
This is the 33rd Mind and Life Dialogue organized by the Mind and Life Institute and the 13th edition held in Dharamshala. The Mind and Life Institute is a non-profit institution dedicated to building a scientific understanding of the mind in order to reduce suffering and promote well-being. The 5th session of the 16th Tibetan Parliament in Exile, which is a budget session for the financial year 2017 to 2018, began on Wednesday this week. Khenpo Sonam Temple, Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament, spoke about a variety of issues facing the Tibetan movement led by the Central Tibetan Administration. He spoke about the middle way approach and China's growing disregard for the rights of its ethnic minorities, including the Tibetan people, and urged the Chinese government to resume the dialogue process to find a lasting solution to the Tibet issue. He also spoke on issues such as self-immolation for the cause of Tibet and also highlighted the immense contribution of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the Tibet cause. The official function to commemorate the 59th anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising Day was held at Tsuklakhang on Saturday last week. Sri George Baker, the chief guest and a member of the Indian Parliament from Bharatiya Janata Party, lauded the purity of the Tibetan people and their non-violent efforts to achieve the just cause of Tibet. CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye addressed Tibetans across the world to maintain the sacred bond of unity among Tibetans and explained its significance for the success of the Tibetan movement. In South Africa, a group of protesters staged a peaceful protest outside the Chinese consulate office, marking it the first ever protest in Cape Town. The protesters called on Chinese President Xi Jinping to revise the failed human rights policies in China and expressed concern at the deteriorating human rights situation in China. They called for freedom for Tibetans and in particular called for the release of the Tibetan language advocate Tashi Wangchuk. Tibetans and Tibet supporters from across the world such as Canberra, Japan, Belgium, Moscow, Geneva, Taiwan, London, New Zealand and New York also commemorated the Tibetan National Uprising Day. 20 members of parliament from the European countries of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania issued a statement of support for the Tibetan people on the 59th Tibetan National Uprising Day. The statement of support was issued as a tribute to the courage and resilience of the Tibetan people in continuing their freedom struggle and to support the Tibetan people in their ongoing efforts to protect their political, social, cultural, and environmental rights. They also called on their respective governments and the European Union to urge China to release all Tibetan political prisoners. They expressed support for the middle way approach of the Central Tibetan administration and asked the Chinese government to begin meaningful dialogue with the envoys of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to resolve the issue of Tibet. To mourn the demise of a 44-year-old self-immolator, Tseko, who died after burning himself in protest against the Chinese government in Ngaba on 7th March 2018, the Department of Religion and Culture of Central Tibetan Administration organized a press service on Wednesday this week. Tseko, popularly known as Tseko Tuksha, hailed from a nomadic village in Meruma Township at Ngaba County in eastern Tibet. 152 Tibetans have self-immolated in protest against Chinese repressive policies, of which 130 have succumbed to their burns. Tseko's self-immolation marks the first self-immolation protest in the year 2018. President Dr. Lobsang Singye, in his condolence remarks, spoke briefly about Tseko's life and described him as a hard-working father of two who always stepped forward to work for the Tibet cause. So much for this week. See you next time and have a great weekend.